Look, kids, a new level of idiot was just released. Kirk Herbstreit publicly confirms ESPN's bias against the Big 12 in one of the stupidest things you can do. This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. Kirk Herbstreit joined On 3 and Andy Staples for a podcast where he confirmed ESPN's bias against the Big 12. That's not good. Your employer probably isn't going to like that. And everything he said was cowardly at best. We'll start there. We'll also get to, is Shedeur Sanders turning down certain NFL teams? Deion Sanders had to delete a tweet about this. Some dramas going down in Colorado, and also BYU illegally stealing Utah's players. This has started to heat up to the point where some Utah fans are asking for the Utes to go independent. Can everybody just calm down for a second? And if you hit subscribe, I get to keep my job. Kirk Herbstreit, we already know he doesn't love the Big 12. We already know ESPN doesn't love the Big 12, but they've done this silently, right? Or without complete and utter disrespect for a while until this season. Feels like everything's compiled to now. And go back to 2021, Bob Bowlesby, as the Big 12 commissioner, sent a cease and desist to ESPN. It was like, stop tampering with Texas and Oklahoma. Stop tampering with other schools' opportunities to leave our conference or this whole expansion deal. Please. ESPN responds, we don't know what there is to cease and desist from. And since that day, it already wasn't good, but since that day, it's like the four letters have had it out for the Big 12. And now Kirk Herbstreit, one of their biggest voices, does something really, really stupid. He's like, they're wrapping up a point on this podcast with On 3. And Kirk goes, oh, wait. And another thing, brings this up on his own. He's like, oh, yeah, everybody thinks we have a bias toward the SEC. They think ESPN loves the SEC, which, by the way, Kirk, I'm looking at the numbers, at the money. You do. Your employer wants the SEC to succeed because they are inside traders in the SEC and ultimately the college football playoff. Kirk would go on to say, though, that only one SEC team is in the Final Four and that it's still a dream scenario, an awesome brand scenario for ESPN, a great thing. He's quoted as saying, the only one missing is Michigan. Oh, is it a good idea to start naming the brands that would be cool to have? Like, oh, well, we wish we had Michigan in here because they're a bigger brand probably than Penn State. He didn't say that, but let's put two and two together. To paraphrase the rest of what he said, says this idea that we want Alabama, A&M, Auburn. Are you kidding me? If you're asking us who we want, we'll take Ohio State and Notre Dame every year. Not true. Not remotely true. There's no one. Like, what's crazy about this is he admits and is about to further admit that they want big brands in the college football playoff final. They want big brands. They're rooting for big brands. But in the middle of that, he's got to lie. He's got to say that they don't want Alabama to be there, that Alabama being there is a bad thing compared to other universities. If you're already going to dig yourself a hole, don't go further by just in the middle of it, spatting a lie and calling out Alabama fans. Alabama fans in the corner going, what did you call us out for? A&M fans packing their 110,000-seat stadium going, was that necessary? I'll put a brief pin in this too. In this interview, Kirk Herbstreit admits to not being on Twitter, deleting the app, and his son runs his Twitter. Why would you throw... I've done this before. I have an intern that runs the Locked On Big 12 Twitter account. So like they'll tweet a take, and people will get pissed off, and I'm like, look, that's the intern, dog. Yeah, it's his take. That's kind of cheap. It's cheap for me to do. He's not my son. The dude's just letting his son get dragged on Twitter every day. What? Unpause. Take the pin back out. Says the only one you're missing is Michigan. The idea that we want Alabama, A&M, Auburn. Are you kidding me? No, I'm not, Kirk. We're not idiots. You can't lie your way out of this. He says, if you're asking us who we want, we'll take Ohio State every year. You would, wouldn't you, Mr. Ohio State grad? We'll take ESPN wants to start picking. We'll take Ohio State every year and Notre Dame. If you accuse us of anything, this is great. This is a great line. It's about I'm almost tearing up. This is so insane. If you accuse us of anything, Kirk Herbstreit says this. Accuse us of wanting Ohio State or wanting Notre Dame or wanting these big brands. That's who you want. I mean, bash my head against a wall. If I'm any executive at ESPN, no, don't say this. Joel Klatt at Fox says that it says that the SEC, sponsored by ESPN, is dead. The narrative that they're the best conference head over heels than everybody else, that narrative is dead. And Kirk Herbstreit's response is, you think we like the SEC? We don't. We just like big brands. Stop. Put the shovel down. He said, if you accuse us of anything, accuse us of wanting Ohio State, Notre Dame, big brands. That's who you want. And Brett Yormark's over here going, is anybody else listening to this? This is what we want you to cease and desist from, ruining college football. No, there was never an inkling, a twinkle in his eye of, we want Boise State, Arizona State, SMU. We want those ragtag pals. Even Tessitore was like, oh, well, this is good that they're here. Herbstreit's like, yeah, we don't want them. We want the big brands. This is a dream for us. We got Notre Dame, Ohio State. Like, I went to one of those schools, and the other one's Notre Dame. So, isn't that awesome? He finishes off with something along the lines of, you don't want these small, little Southern schools. And again, Alabama's like, what is he talking about? What? He calls out Clemson, too. Clemson's like, what are you talking about? What do you mean you don't want us? What? Again, I think if you're Kirk Herbstreit's boss, you're like, Kirk, buddy, we can push ESPN. We can push the SEC propaganda, and they can all be ticked off at us, but we're never going to actually say that we're doing it out loud. We're never just going to blatantly tell them what we're doing. What have you done? Why did you do this? Why are you on Andy Staples' On 3 podcast in the first place to even say this and then bring it up on your own? ESPN doesn't have a bias toward the SEC. ESPN has a bias toward big brands. We like money. Am I right, guys? He called out Texas. He called out Notre Dame. He called out Ohio State and Penn State being a dream scenario, great scenario for the college football playoff Final Four because they're big brands. That money, extra money will go in his pocket. Extra money will go to ESPN because of big brands. And that's what runs this thing. Is money. That's it. They don't want the Big 12 to succeed. TNT is picking up the Big 12 product because it knows that there isn't a gap in college football. The gap is only made by a TV network. And the second TNT can prove to America that the Big 12 is just as good as some of these other conferences, they've got a huge payday coming. And ESPN, similar to the way it killed the MLB, similar to the way it killed the NBA, will kill off the SEC again. It'll do what it does best, ruin good things. And then there will be. I ask you the same question I asked our guest yesterday, Cameron Stewart. When's the last time you turned on ESPN to watch a talk show? Maybe you have. I can tell you confidently I haven't. Barbershop, sometimes. I actually changed barbershops a year ago. They don't play ESPN on my new one. I don't go on my way to avoid it. I watch live games. When's the last time you turned it on for actual commentary or anything outside of a live game? Bad, man. Bad. And now a guy like this who speaks for the whole network says that we want the big teams. Our bias would be against the big teams. Cool. Great. Already knew it. Thanks for telling us. Smart. Coming up, Deion Sanders, are you okay? This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Rocket Money. Today, I am 23 years old. I will be 24 in a few days. But today I'm 23, and as long as I'm 23, I cannot understand finances. I'm trying to buy a house right now, and I don't know what's happening. Loud noises. Rocket Money helped me save like $50 a month, though, because I did it. I don't, like, I'm reading the sponsor list, and I was like, I could use this. I go and I ask them, do I have subscriptions I'm paying for that I forgot about? And they're like, yes, and one of them's fraudulent. So now I'm not anymore. It's a personal finance app, helps you find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitors spending, and helps you lower your bills. I called Adobe. It was like, cancel. I'm paying for the same thing twice. And I lowered one of my other subscriptions with them. Rocket Money has over 5 million users, has saved a total of 500 million in canceled subscriptions. Go to Rocket Money today. They have an app too, super easy. And with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel unwanted subscriptions. Reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Visit rocketmoney.com/lockedon today.
Drake, did Coach Prime get fooled this last week or so on social media?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is a word to the wise out there. Stay off of Twitter the best you can, or don't respond to random tweets from random accounts. This is from a Wesley Steinberg, who is notorious for being a parody. There is no real Wesley Steinberg that I can find who's an actual NFL reporter, and he started his Twitter account in March of 2021, has gained 18,000 followers, and tweeted out that Colorado quarterback Shedeur Sanders has no interest in playing for the hashtag Browns or hashtag Titans. This could have major NFL draft implications. Shedeur's father, Deion Sanders, will demand his son goes to a big market team, and then continues on saying that there is no way that he would go to those two organizations. And Deion Sanders, instead of just letting this slide, letting a parody account be a parody account, he DMs him and says, "Stop lying. Have some class and professionalism about yourself, my man." He even tweets out another thing saying these allegations and rumors are not true, that this reporter is incorrect, and then quickly deletes that tweet because immediately Twitter started thrashing Deion Sanders for responding to a fake account. So this is a classic example of please watch who you're quote tweeting or responding to on Twitter. And for Deion Sanders, who lives on social media in a very different way from Lane Kiffin, it seems like more and more college football coaches are trying to seem cool and active on social media. This was just a very interesting look. Now, I've said on your show, I've said on my show that I am foot in mouth about Deion Sanders. I was questioning 6 months ago if he could be a head coach at the Power 5 level, Power 4, I should say level, and could win at Colorado. He did that. He proved me wrong. He proved a lot of people wrong, and I've apologized for my takes previously on Deion Sanders. But in a moment like this, my message is very clear. Deion, no, don't even respond. There's no way an NFL organization is going to look at these messages, at these tweets from a random account and see them as gospel. And responding to something like this never puts yourself in a good situation, never paints you or your son in a solid light. This is a very interesting situation where Deion Sanders makes a mistake on social media, and then you see what kind of repercussion might happen, because I don't know. You shouldn't do this. It's never a good look, again, when you get duped by a burner account.
They say that they would never decline teams. They wouldn't, we wouldn't say we want to go to this team, that team. Do you think that, though, Coach Prime and Shedeur kind of say, like, man, we'd really like to avoid this destination, that destination? Like, what's your personal take on this one?
It sounds so odd saying it, today in January of 2025 that Deion Sanders is humble, and people will hear that and they'll say, well, no, he's not. I mean, the dude takes ad deals and he's Affleck or Geico or whatever it is and doing. I mean, he's prime time and Coach Prime. He wears the shades, but more and more of what we've gotten from him at the podium, whether it was with Kalani Sitake during that bowl game with BYU, or in the middle of the season where he's talking about his sons or Travis Hunter, or his reactions after the Heisman ceremony, the dude is an excellent marketer. He's really good at branding, and I don't think that he is cocky enough or a D-bag enough that people should avoid Deion Sanders as a good human being. And that was the storyline in August when he was popping off at reporters and things seemed like they were falling apart in Boulder, is Deion Sanders is too cocky. He's not humble. He's the kind of guy who lets the ego get in the way. But what we've learned, to me, in this last college football season is behind closed doors and even in front of the media, a lot of the time, Deion Sanders is very genuine, and I don't see a situation where his son gets drafted to a team and Deion says no, or Shedeur says no. He has very obviously raised his family right. He's raised a college football program right. The GPA at Colorado has never been so high. The GDP, the entire economy in Boulder is soaring right now because of who Deion Sanders is. He's proven to the country you thought he was this cocky Coach Prime, but he's actually a very genuine, strong human being and runs a strong culture and strong program. I think that points toward him being perfectly happy with wherever Travis Hunter or Shiloh or Shedeur end up going in the upcoming draft or in the NFL. I'm not sure if there's a single thing. I would say confidently, without knowing directly from Deion, I would say confidently there is not a football team that he would completely shut out or turn down or say Shedeur is not going to play for you.
I think that sometimes he gets that rap because he interacts with the media so much differently than everyone else. Yeah. He's not really here for the coach speak BS, right? Coach Prime is so genuine in that way that I feel like he just, when you ask him one of those typical reporter coach speak, hey, coach, what'd you think? They lose by 40 and they say, what do you think about your effort tonight? He just gives it to you like it is. Like, he just doesn't have time for the BS, for lack of better words. He just shoots so straight that I think people take that shooting straight, that abruptness, as, oh, he hates the media. And that's not really the case. Asked him last year, man, Coach Prime, and you mentioned back in August, Coach Prime, what did you think about last season? Well, we sucked, man. And so he says that and he's straightforward and people are like, oh, well, this guy's a jerk. And it's like, no, you just asked him a stupid coach speak question, because our media, the media is just, we're in this world of just, nobody asks thought provoking, nobody asks deeper questions. They just want the clickbaity title of Coach Prime saying something, off the cuff or whatever. And yeah, he's just, they mistake his being genuine and his no time for BS as abruptness or harshness. And that's where I think they misunderstand him.
Well, shocking as it may be, ESPN and the national media has not painted a fair light for Deion Sanders. I know that's crazy. ESPN doing something that is amoral over the course of all of college football and toward college football fans. But when you turned on the TV last year, it was about the downfall, that post-Stanford game, about how is Deion Sanders cut out to be D1 material or to be a D1 head coach. The more controversy there is surrounding Deion, the better for these TV networks. They want to paint him as someone who can't get out of his own way, and he is so boisterous that there is no winning at Colorado. There is no culture at Colorado. So when Deion starts to do normal, good stuff, it seems to be overall overlooked, and ESPN doesn't want to report on the positives that are coming out of that football program. And of course, I get a push notification and see that Deion Sanders deletes tweet in response to burner account Wesley Steinberg, because what we want to do is start talking about the controversy that Deion might be surrounded in. Now, should he have tweeted at or DM'd this random Twitter account that doesn't even exist and is a fake reporter? No, don't do that. Please don't do that. But what we continue to get is this controversy surrounding Deion Sanders that is truly unfair and is pushed by national media because it drives clicks. And you and I have had this conversation on your show before. When it comes to driving clicks, talking Deion Sanders, do it in a positive way. Let's actually give the guy a fair shake. And certainly there are regional media outlets that are doing so, and smaller analysts that are trying to give him his fair due. ESPN's not one of those. The major media is not one of those. And now here he goes making a minute mistake, and it's overblown.
Back to Shedeur for just a minute, we'll wrap up. Where do you think he fits best? Where do you think he ends up? Or what would be the best case scenario, maybe is the better way to ask it?
Well, I want to pitch out there too, TJ, that there have been other burner accounts that are pretending to be national media saying that Shedeur Sanders is not grading well, or that the NFL scouts don't see him being a first-round draft pick. I think he's certainly a top 10 pick, one of the first or second quarterbacks off the board of this draft class. And with that, maybe the Giants are taking a stab at that third or fourth pick with Shedeur Sanders. I wouldn't be surprised if he's top 5. He's a program-changing, organization-changing kind of guy. And I do believe Deion Sanders is at Colorado next season, even without his son there playing quarterback. But what if, he's able to have a hand in his NFL career in New York? There's a much longer conversation when that day comes. And I believe Shedeur Sanders is still a top 5, top 10 overall pick and would thrive in a market like New York. You're a Tampa Bay guy, right? I know you said you went to the game on Sunday, the Tampa game on Sunday. You see him in a Bucs jersey, I guess.
Dude, I would flip out if he came in a Bucs jersey. But I will say, former Big 12 guy, I am in love with Baker Mayfield, right, in the most wholesome way possible. So I don't want to lose Baker. Give me Hunter, though. There's no way he falls because the Bucs are going to the playoffs. But I would. We won't have an opportunity to get Shedeur. And with a quarterback, probably don't need to. But if there was any way we could trade up for Hunter, I would sign up for that 7 times a week. So. No doubt. There's some interesting allegations that have been proposed that BYU, though a program of faith, may not have acted the most holy.
Yeah, TJ, it's very interesting you put it that way. And it's the case right now that a lot of Utah fans are dreaming, and that is that BYU is colluding somehow or tampering with the program and the Utes to bring in their players. Now, this comes from now multiple Utah players entering the transfer portal, committing to BYU out of the transfer portal. A couple guys who had dropped commitments to Utah to go to BYU who were coming off of mission as well. And the loud screams from Ute fans are very clear, and that is this is some sort of tampering. This is not right. Or BYU has acted out of its culture and out of the NCAA bylaws. And what is crazy to me is it kind of starts from Kalani Sitake, the head coach of BYU, going up to a couple of players after the Utah game, shaking their hands, giving them a hug. Carson Ryan, I believe, was one of them. Keanu Tunavasa was another big defensive lineman coming from Utah to BYU. And you go back to the Holy War, the first two players who he gives a big hug to are those two guys. And now Utah fans think it's very interesting or very odd that they would be sought out by the head coach in the middle of the season, and now they commit to go over to BYU and not play for Utah anymore. And then a Rivals analyst comes on to Locked On Utes, actually, which is a very reputable podcast and very good Utah podcast. And this wasn't the thought of the host, but the thought of his guest, saying that Utah, BYU are in a total skirmish because the Cougars are promising NIL money to recruits that they cannot deliver on. They're not giving that money. That was a direct quote, that the numbers weren't there and they were flubbed by the Cougars in this recruiting battle. And so now when you have not just fans saying, oh, how fishy is it that the head coach is shaking hands with these two specific players and then they both commit to BYU, but also analysts, Rivals analysts, saying that BYU is doing something not fishy but completely illegal by promising NIL money, not delivering on that NIL money. And even the players themselves, their families have come out and said, this is not the case. It's kind of tough to understand. Are we dealing with a petty rivalry? Are we dealing with people who are just saying stuff because they're bitter, or actual recruiting violations from the standpoint of BYU? Because the allegations are that BYU is breaking NCAA bylaw. And if that's the case, then this is a very serious accusation coming from, again, not just fans, but also analysts.
Yeah, it is interesting to me, and it is fun to me that the Holy War didn't just have to last 60 minutes. We will probably get 12 months of it, which is certainly great for us. And one of the better rivalries in sports, maybe one of the best in the conference.
DJ, you've got kids. You know, it's like they're in the back seat and they're screaming. And you're like, why are you screaming? There's nothing to be screaming about. We're in January. Everything's okay. We're not playing a football game against each other for a very long time. Can you just not scream for a second? But oh my gosh, when we talk about underrated rivalries in college football, this has got to be one of those.
Is there a Zapruder film of the BYU like the coaching staff seeing the players on that? Like, have they broken that down on Twitter and everywhere else?
Stallions is right there, right? He's in the front row. Stallions has the camera out and he's filming him. I guess it's a foreign concept to some people that a head coach would go to players that he recruited when they were in high school. It's so interesting when you look at offer lists for all of these players coming out of high school. BYU and Utah are both there. Both institutions are, while BYU is very innately tied to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that's their entire brand. They're the flagship university. Utah is as well. A large majority of their student body, a good portion of the football players are going on mission, and they are tied to that faith. So typically, you'll see a player have both those offers. It's not rare for Kalani Sitake or Kyle Whittingham to hug or shake the hands of a player they recruited for 2, 3, 4 years, built a relationship with when they were in high school. I just don't. To me, that's where I really get confused here. How are we nitpicking? This guy shook a player's hand post-game. I played junior high football. We shook the hands of the opposing team post-game. We weren't colluding. There was no our junior high head coach wasn't trying to get the best 7th grader in the county to come over and play for us. We were just saying good game, on guys that we would go to the movies with that very next week or played travel baseball with. Crazy to me that this rivalry has taken the turn of the accusation that BYU, because of who their head coach shook hands with post-game, is somehow trying to steal Utah players illegally.
Is this just sour grapes from Utah? All the calls to go independent, the calls to leave. It feels like since the moment, I will back up, it feels like since the moment they got in the Big 12, I am not a Utah fan or hater. So as an outsider, it feels like from the moment they got in the Big 12, they thought they were too good for it. And I'm sure that not living up to expectations this year, nobody's in a good mood, whether they're inside the building, outside the building, accusing refs of this, that, and the other. Is this just sour grapes, or what's the situation with Utah?
Sour grapes is probably a way to put it. When you're projected to do a college football playoff level, season. What continues to blow my mind is Utah had every opportunity to go 11-1 this year. Their quarterback goes down, and then from there they give up, and it to this day, doesn't make any sense to me how one player, even your quarterback who's so vital, could go down and Utah could fall apart. If I'm a fan of that university, and I'll say this, I'm a fan of every Big 12 team. The more that Arizona State wins, the more that I win. The more that UCF wins, if they go 12-0, then I win. I want more and more elite teams in this conference. I think Utah could have been that. And as baffling as it is for an outsider like me that Utah would go 5-7, miss a bowl game, it's even more baffling for their fan base that the expectation is Big 12 championship, college football playoff. Now, not only are they losing the vast majority of their season going 5-7, but BYU is taking some of their players or players that were not just contributors, but could have been long-term contributors. Of course you're upset. Of course you're unhappy. This goes for Florida State, Alabama, and Auburn. It goes for even Texas Tech in Texas or A&M in Texas. The second that a guy leaves your school and goes to your direct rival, and then other players start doing the same thing, you're ticked off. You want some sort of excuse. You need a coping mechanism. If you're a Utah fan, that coping mechanism post 5-7 is to say, well, somebody must be cheating. There has to be something illegal going on. Otherwise, there's no way players would leave Utah and go to BYU. So I don't know if I understood, TJ, the depth of this rivalry, that when Utah goes 5-7, the blame is not necessarily on the coaching staff. The blame is now on BYU. But that's the making of a great rivalry, right? Yeah. Where as soon as that team's bad, they can just blame the rival for doing something illegal. That's awesome. That's only going to draw eyeballs nationally. And when 2 months ago, the Utah athletic director was saying, we were excited to be in the Big 12. We're not right now. This just adds more and more fuel to that fire to say, Utah, I mean, you're spiteful, sure. The sour grapes are there, sure. But what is your place long-term in the Big 12? Where does Utah fit in? Do they fit in? Do they want to fit in? We're going to really have to answer that in this upcoming season. Yeah,
you can blame fans. And I know that he walked those comments back for your athletic director, though. I get being heated. I get heated. I understand it. Yep. As a dad of 3 little kids, I get it. But to say that from the podium, to say that and give that in a press, like, dude, just go punch a hole in the wall, right? Like, just do not, because I don't know. What's your take? Is Utah in the Big 12 in 5 years?
Oh boy, you have another 8 minutes. What? There are the rumors. There are the Utah burner accounts to say that Utah should go independent and just pull a Notre Dame route. Utah is in the Big 12 in 5 years, and truly the biggest problem for Utah fans would hate to hear this, but it's the truth. They have backed themselves into a corner where they can't leave. A year ago, I would have said differently. Okay, if there's anybody in the Big 12 who could work a backdoor deal into the Big 10, it's probably Utah. Today, they look a lot less desirable after 5-7, and after that, their athletic director pulled his pants down and showed his butt to everybody in America. I just don't know that anybody is going to chase after Utah. They're definitely in the Big 12 in 5 years because they've started to cut short the avenues out.
Drake, where can people follow you? Where can they get more of your content?
At LO Big 12 or at Drake C. Toll on Twitter and wherever you find your podcast with Locked On Big 12.
Thanks, buddy.
Oh, yeah.